Thanks for the opportunity just to give this pitch presentation on the Irish BVD programme and touching on organisation and challenges and progress. And as you can see, the paper was published in Frontiers earlier this month. And apologies for my late joining. I said in a message to Inga there I was trying to juggle 2 meetings in 2 time zones and didn't really manage either particularly well. And obviously the 2 presentations from Maria and myself would have run better the other way around. Anyways, in terms of organisation of the Irish BVD programme, so firstly to note that it's industry led and the programme is coordinated by Animal Health Ireland, and we Animal Health Ireland are, as you may be aware, really operate as a public-private partnership. So we convene an implementation group from across both public and private sectors then that really oversee the aspects of the programme, and that's supported by input from a technical working group. And the programme, and again Maria has probably covered, is based on testing of tissue samples. So it's a direct virus testing rather than a Scandinavian type approach based on serology. The programme was voluntary in 2012 and then became a compulsory national programme in 2013 to present, and really that being enabled by the introduction of legislation. And in terms of the legislation that was introduced at that stage, these are just some of the key requirements. So tag testing, as was the case already, but with tissue sample enabled tags by 20 days, and that including stillborn or aborted calves if those were present and available. The sample then to be submitted for testing. A prohibition obviously on the moving of positive or suspect animals, but in addition, for any animal born after the start of the programme, so January 2013, that they had to have a negative test result before they could leave the farm, and making provision for the opportunity to retest to differentiate between persistently infected and transiently infected animals. But critically and pertinent to the challenge element of the programme, not a mandatory or a compulsory requirement to remove persistently infected animals, that really being a piece that industry was being asked to take on. In terms of testing in the programme, primarily delivered through a series of private laboratories designated for the process. They may use ELISA or PCR, but they have to satisfy a series of designation criteria, and those include having accreditation to ISO 17025, delivering to a specified turnaround times, standardized reporting templates to the programme database, and that being underpinned and supported by a variety of activities then delivered by the National Reference Laboratory. This slide shows for overall for beef and dairy the numbers of calves tested per week and in different years. So it is a little complicated, but the two key points that it illustrates as the title shows are firstly spring calving and herd expansion. So you can see clearly the strong bias towards spring calving in the Irish context. As I say, these are numbers of tests, so it's lagging behind actual births perhaps by a week or so, but into late February is really the peak numbers. And you can see if we look at 2020 here at peak, in and around 180,000 tests at peak week, and that comparing to back in 2013, so just to illustrate the expansion piece, at around 130,000. And again, if we look at that specifically with the dairy sector, that expansion being driven primarily through dairying and expansion of that. And you can see here, if we look at the beef sector, then again a spring peak, but somewhat later and also more extended. And then the other from an epidemiological perspective in the programme, the other outcome of the spring calving piece is that, to a large extent at least, the majority of PI calves, persistently infected calves that will be born each year, are born in the spring, and there's the opportunity then to identify and to remove those before we actually move into the breeding season, which typically for dairy herds starts in early to mid-May. So there is a window of opportunity there to identify and remove PIs before the next crop of susceptible fetuses really is established in utero, and that being distinct from the pattern in not in programs, but in industries or sectors where there's essentially all year round calving. The other piece, I suppose, just to reflect on in terms of the calving profile is from a laboratory perspective, that the enormous variation in sample throughput that there is within the laboratories. But despite that, they have managed to maintain essentially a 24-hour turnaround throughout the year. Data management is another key piece of the program in terms of its organization, and this is delivered primarily through the development of resources by AHI, but on the ICBF website. That's the Irish Cattle Breeding Federation, and without going into detail on the slide, it enables a series of data flows both to the individual herd owner who submitted the samples, to practitioners, to government databases, and so on. And the primary direct communication of results back to the herd owner is typically by SMS message to their mobile phones. And again, Maria has shown you this or a similar graphic already, but in addition, within the dashboard, there is the development of this screen, which provides summary information to the farmer. It's available to their practitioner, where the consents are in place, and to AHI, and allows us to drill right down to the level of individual test values for a given animal. So extremely useful in terms of program management. So moving on then to progress and challenges. So these two graphs illustrate the same profiles essentially, albeit that one is at animal level on the left and the other at herd level on the right. But you can see in and around a 20-fold reduction in prevalence of persistently infected animals or herds with positive results across the program. And again, just the numbers at the bottom of the slide there. So in terms of expansion, moving from a total of around 2.1 million calves in 2013 to 2.4 million tested in 2020. And those are born in approximately 83,000 breeding herds, with 365 of those, so the 0.57% you see on the right-hand side, having a positive result in 2020. And if we look at that more visually here in terms of geographical distribution, again, the maps show quite nicely the progress in terms of reduction of positive calves being born nationally over the program period to date. And moving on then to perhaps the key challenge, and there were and are plenty of continuing challenges in the program, but the key one perhaps has been the retention by some herd owners of positive animals, and essentially or primarily in an attempt to fatten those and to get some sort of value out of them, rather than disposing of them shortly after birth or after disclosure. And you can see, so on the graphic on the left, so this is for 2013, but approximately a third of animals still alive around 200 days, 6 months after disclosure. And in particular, as you might imagine anyway, that been particularly an issue in animals born into the beef sector, as opposed to the dairy sector. But This was explored further in terms of projections or outputs from the Irish BVD model, which was really developed to explore this and to look at the impact of various options within the programme. And the graphic here shows the model output. So if the level of retention, and at this point, retention refers to a calf that's alive more than 7 weeks after its initial date of disclosure. But if the level of retention stayed the same as in 2015, then this shows the numbers that the model was indicating would still be being borne through to 2022. And to put that in context, we started with around 13,000, 14,000 per year, but also the target of eradication essentially by 2020. So clearly at that rate of progress, we were not going to achieve that. Alternatively, within the model, if they were being removed from the week of birth in 2017, you can see the impact that the model shows of that measure. And these outputs from the model were instrumental really in helping the implementation group to, I suppose, to recognise the challenge, but also to see some of the measures that could contribute to addressing it. So clearly eradication has not been achieved. We are close by 2020, but not yet there. But in terms of a number of the additional measures then that have been put in place. So the first one of those was reducing the interval after which an animal was deemed to be retained, because a number of further actions flow after that point. But that reduced from 49 days initially to 35 days and currently to 21 days. In addition, automatic restriction of herds that are retaining PIs. So those restrictions been imposed at the point where the animal is deemed to be retained. So currently, or at least in 2020 or 21 days. And also at that point, issuing biosecurity notifications to neighbouring herds. So highlighting to them that there was a PI animal being retained in a contiguous herd. Also throughout the programme, there have been varying levels of financial support provided by DAFM, that's the Department of Agriculture, government, in financial supports for removal, but increasingly adjustments of those and particularly front loading of them to encourage removal within 10 days. Also funded veterinary advice for herds with positives, including and particularly addressing the merits or otherwise of retesting. Maria has covered already the veterinary epidemiological investigations, the TASAs, which have been really important in driving further veterinary involvement, and also testing to identify apparent false negative animals. And this slide then shows the change or the progress that has been made with that, in particular to focus perhaps just on the top row, but the median days to removal. So 2013, 53 days, and then some decreases, but similar in 2015, 2016, and then a step change in 2017, 18, and that associated with the change in the period of retention, and then dropping further in 2019, 20 to 7 or 6 days, and actually in the current year with further measures that have been introduced, currently a median of 2 days this year. So this is my last slide. So if you want to see more, I would encourage you to look at the paper to get more details of those measures and some further discussion. And finally, just to acknowledge the co-authors on the paper.